Tervetuloa tähän Finlitin kirjakeskusteluun Niilas Holmbergin kanssa. Minä olen Helga Pettersson ja tulen Tromsön ja Finnmarkun fylkning-kommunista. Ja Niilas, me ollaan tosi ylpeitä, että sinä halusit tulla tähän digitaalinen kirjakeskusteluun. Ja paljon onnittelut sun ensimmäinen romaani Halla-Helle.
Yes.
Ole hyvä. Yeah, and that's what I was saying was congratulations on your first novel, Niilas Halla-Helle. And I have been doing some research on you, and I found out that you are such a versatile person. You are a writer and musician and activist, and now also your first novel. And I want to ask you, what inspires you to write and all of this other?
Probably several things. It's a wide question. Well, what inspires me is the people who are familiar with my work, they probably can see that I discuss a lot of social things and things happening in the society and the cultural situation and the environmental situation of my surroundings and my people. So those things, of course, serve as an inspiration, but yeah, I guess it's just. But why am I choosing to, or not even choosing, but why am I ending up discussing those things through art is another question, and that's also to do with many things. My background, how I was brought up by my pretty cultural, artistic parents, and also the big support I got from my relatively small community. I come from a village of 500 people, Otsejohka, and even though it's not many people here, there were actually many people who gave me means to develop as an artist when I was young, because that was for some reason something I wanted to do and what felt natural to me from a very early age. So yeah, and I happen to be this sort of abstract thinker, which means thinking through symbols and stuff like that, which probably is the reason why I have focused so much on poetry. I think I've written 6 poetry collections, and as you say, this novel is now the first one, although it includes some poetry as well.
Yes, it does. And about your novel, would you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, well, the novel is, there's many different ways to answer this. There's the very short version, and then there's different levels. The very short version is that this novel is about contradictions and ambivalence. But of course, one of the first things that come to mind, I would imagine, to a person who has read this book would say that it's a lot to do about Sami culture. In the story goes from a first person perspective, from a perspective of a young Finnish man from southern Finland who has grown interest to the northern parts and to the Sami culture. and he moves north and forms a relationship with an artist, a painter or a visual artist from Otsiojoki. And this was actually the first thought, the first sort of the root of all this. I got this idea of an outsider perspective to approaching things very familiar to me from an outsider's perspective. Because if I'm completely honest, I do have certain like social aims in my art, because a lot of these things about my culture and my people are very little known nationwide, because the school doesn't teach almost anything about us. So I do have to admit that I want to bring some light to some certain things into light, and it's often said that you need a story to make an effect. You need a good story to sort of to make change. But it's not actually enough. You need a story that the receiver of the story can relate to. And this was the reason why I chose to approach this whole thing from an outsider perspective. So this guy moves, Samu moves into Otsiojoki, and little by little gets to know our world to some extent. And of course, one of the things he learns is that you can never learn everything, or you cannot understand everything, and you're not even supposed to understand everything, and it's not necessary. You don't need to understand everything in order to respect and accept. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really tells, you show it in your book. And as a reader, you describe and almost educate us about the Sami culture. And I understand now that maybe that was your intention. You want the majority society to see. Is that what you want? One of the aspects?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's good that you clarify it's one of the aspects. Of course, it's still fiction, and it's still art, and it carries aesthetic characteristics. And it's just, not all my work is created to educate and to teach, but in this particular work, I found it very natural and pretty easy to add that aspect to the whole entity of the book. And I of course the trick was to try to do it while not sort of doing something to the detriment of the artistic nature of the piece. So it have everything.
Yeah, and it also has this element of the dream part, which I want to ask also. Do you? It's theoretical, but it's also it gets us thinking about dreams. Do you have a thought about this element? What did you want to say about this, about dreams?
Well, the
Without
dreams.
telling too much.
Yeah, exactly. The dreams, because this Finnish guy who comes, this Samu, he's a very rationalistic guy, and he even though he's interested in our culture, he sort of he despises too strong a word, but he doesn't feel comfortable when it comes to, you know, like this mystical things considered mystical and somehow unrational. But these sort of dreams, because this I will reveal as much as to say that this this Sami artist in this story is experiencing mental challenges, and she starts to write down her dreams and send them to Samu, who is actually an ex student of psychology in Helsinki University, and he starts to look into those dreams from a psychoanalytic perspective. He takes that approach, and a very sort of scientific approach to dreams, although I'm not saying that psychoanalysis necessarily is science. But he in his mind, he's trying to approach the dreams from a scientific perspective. But in the end, these dreams sort of serve as a bridge between something considered scientific and objective and something considered mystical and not straightforward and unscientific and subjective. So these the dreams actually serve as something that that narrow the cultural gap, because we all dream, regardless of culture, and there's a lot of common symbolism in our dreams, no matter the culture we spring from.
Wonderful. It really binds it together in a way. You also write in your Halla Hella about decolonization, and I wanted to ask you what you mean about this term.
Well, decolonization or decolonialism is that's also a very wide question, and there's many ways to approach the theme. But in short, I guess it's what decolonization means is to deconstruct colonial ways of living and colonial ways of thinking, because we Sami have been colonized for centuries, and we now live in a society where there's sort of we are sort of yeah, as I said, the book is about contradictions and ambivalence, and ambivalence means wanting two opposite things at the same time. And this is very relevant for not only Sami, but I guess indigenous peoples in general, living in a society where both the indigenous culture is present and the majority culture, the capitalistic Western culture is present. And decolonization means finding ways to reintroduce traditional ways of being, and it's easier to describe the practical side of these things, which means, you know, reconnecting with the land that you are from, traditional ways of, you know, traditional livelihoods and such. But the other side of that is the traditional way of thinking, and that is actually the whole root of everything, and it should start there. And this is a really, really deep and long conversation if we go there. But that's, in short, the answer to your question.
I think it brings it up, and it tells us as the majority society to be more. And I think that it's very nice with art and with books. And although it's fictional, it's meant to make us think. And that your book is really, it makes the reader think about very many aspects of Sami culture, but also our own culture. So it was a very nice read, and I must say that.
Oh, good to hear that. Thank you.
Our festival theme this year is Matkalla, on a journey. Do you feel that you are on your journey in front of literature, I mean?
Well, I guess in some way of thinking, but I'm on, I guess, if you approach it like that, one is on several journeys simultaneously. But to me, I just live as myself, and right now my life is balancing between living outdoors and doing stuff, gathering and fishing for food, and right now I'm building a turf hut. So balancing between that and then this artistic work, writing and making music and such things. So that's pretty much my life when it comes to the things I do. But then what we consider art is a little bit different than in the majority cultures. It's, for me, it's pretty difficult to even describe art, because it's not strictly, it's not this product based world that I considered art. It's not only the product and it's more also the process which which can result in an artistic product, and that process is everything you do. All the ways you think, the ways you move towards, the ways you walk towards those productions. So it's difficult to.
Yeah, I understand you, or in some ways understand. But also when you are writing a book, because you have written a lot of poems, what is the major difference between, you know, writing poems and this novel? Because of course I understand it's much bigger, but yeah, what do you now have? You have written now a novel, so do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, there's many differences, of course. I have to say that it took more time to do this novel. Not that a poetry collection is shorter or a lighter work because it has less words or such things. It's a very, you need to you need to focus on that as well, of course. That's clear, but in this case there was a lot of like not only the writing part but also the research I had to do, because it, as you said, there is a lot of stuff about dreams and there's a lot of history in the book as well. So this was a huge work. I was constantly working with it for more than 2 years.
Yeah.
But what was also very nice about what I want to say about writing a novel, and it sort of, we come back to the thing I said about this whole thing starting from the idea of approaching certain cultural or social things from an outsider perspective. Because in novel, well, you can have characters, of course, in a poetry collection as well, but typically you have those characters, those different sort of thinkers and feelers in a novel. And what you need to do then is to be able to step inside the shoes of those characters with different opinions, different worldviews, and that's very healthy. That's super healthy for also, hopefully the reader can learn something, but definitely the writer, because you need to ask questions you don't ask in your everyday life. You know certain things, but then when you go into this inside this character, you need to, if this character is to learn something, you need to ask questions and explain things. And you need to understand certain what's the word, like preconditions and prejudice and stuff like that. You need to be able to go into dark places that you don't necessarily have to go when you're just living by yourself, and it's very healthy, as I said. So that's one thing.
It is, and what you are saying is what we librarians call that by reading you can emphasize more with other people, and you are just describing just that when you are making a character or reading about, because that's what I do, to read about someone, you open up your mind for more. So that is that's really nice that you say that as a writer also.
Yeah.
And I must say it's been a delight to have this discussion with you. And I think I would like you to read a bit to us as an ending. And I know you have written a lot of poems, and yeah, I would really like to hear you read.
I will read in one condition. I will read a poem from my latest poetry collection, Jälkevuoto. And this has been translated into Norwegian by me and the Norwegian masterful poet Endre Rosette. And I will read one poem from this if you then read it in Norwegian.
And I will do that.
Okay, we have a deal then. Säänehtuvan aahkos, suolkai heijota sukkestuolus, kihtsä teo aknu. Tihtämai tahke, jo ehkä suuastemin, faanas suhtsa laapuita. Muihtaljöitä, mutta aahkosla vaipan. Suetnä senki teo itja soeleni, mi okti tahke johka. Taassalan toola ja tjohkänan stuullui, faanas liekkistä, ipmil liä verpa.
Ok. Såle, et matriark uten ord, gynger rolig i en gyngestol. Knirker som et årefeste. Hun vet hva hun gjør. For hvert åretak flytter båten nærmere. Jeg ber om en fortelling, men hun er trøtt. Trekker seg tilbake slik nattetåka forlater elva. Jeg raker i bålet og setter meg i stolen. Båten varmer. Gud er et verb. Stor kiitos, Niilas. Very big thank you. This has been, I feel I have learned a lot of this conversation, and this poem was really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much. The pleasure has been mine. A very good conversation indeed. And thank you for reading the translation.
You're very welcome.